The Anglo Saxons, these were Germanic tribes who came to Britain from the early 5th century AD with the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, the Victorian 19th century image of them is rather romantic. For the Victorians, they were the archetype, the ancestor of Victorian England, represented as a slightly cruder version of the public school sports hero, blonde, brash, hearty, but essentially good-hearted and moral and good fighters. But always fighters in a good cause, of course. Obviously, there are many ways in which that was an oversimplification. The most obvious way is that early Anglo-Saxons were nothing like, or very little like, upper middle or upper class 19th century English people, except insofar as all human beings have a certain resemblance. One way, indeed, there's a sheer mystery. We know very little about the early Anglo-Saxons, from, say, about 440 to 7 AD. We have to rely on hostile writings, the writings of the Welsh. I'm Welsh myself, and let's say the Welsh were more civilized at the time. They had preserved Christianity in Latin. So the Welsh, in both Latin and Old Welsh, gave hostile accounts of the Anglo-Saxon invaders. There was no Anglo-Saxon writing until the Venerable Bede, the monk who wrote after 700 AD and did a general, very good history of the conversion to Christianity of his English people. But that's the first coherent writing from an Anglo-Saxon himself, and even after that, for the next few hundred years until 1066, there are, of course, Anglo-Saxon documents, both in Anglo-Saxon itself and in Latin, but relatively fewer than you might expect, even after Anglo-Saxon England becomes more civilized. But what we do know about early Anglo-Saxons is that they were pagan. They seemed to worship the horse. Perhaps that is a bit like upper-class Victorians. And they went in for human sacrifice, quite possibly, certainly animal sacrifice, which is not. What about the Anglo-Saxon language? Well, it's only one input into modern English. We have to consider the vast contribution of Latin, whether directly through Latin or through French. There have been certain waves of French input, for example, Norman French, obviously, come to in a later lecture, and from the 17th century, 17th and 18th century. In fact, Anglo-Saxon is very much a different language from modern English. You might say that's obvious. Over 1500 years, all languages changed quite a lot. But let us consider the language of the Anglo-Saxons' great rivals in Britain, the Welsh or Romano-Britons. The Welsh spoken and written note, in 600 AD, is much closer to modern Welsh than Anglo-Saxon is to modern English. In fact, it can be understood by a Welsh reader. You can say the same about the German of the period and present-day German. Even older, classical Greek is much closer to modern Greek than Anglo-Saxon is to modern English. Anglo-Saxon, educated Anglo-Saxon, fell out of favour when the French-speaking Normans took over. It's the same with blood, as far as we can tell. There have been vast previous and subsequent infusions into England's bloodlines. The Celtic and pre-Celtic populations of what's now England were not driven out, as the Victorians thought. They were simply absorbed by the Anglo-Saxon. And then, later on, in the Anglo-Saxon period itself, the Vikings came, related but different, from Scandinavia. Then you had the Normans themselves, you had waves of the Flemings from the Low Countries, Dutch and Huguenot, that's French, Protestant refugees in the 16th, 17th century, to say immigrants in the 19th century, Irish and Jewish people, to say nothing of the more better-known 20th century immigrations. So we're not, as the Victorians thought, overwhelmingly descended from Anglo-Saxons. To say nothing of internal immigration, I find every Englishman today has a Celtic grandmother, Scots, Irish and Welsh, because England's richer than the Celtic countries. The word Angle is used fairly early, but there's no mention of England or Englaland until circa 971. So the Anglo-Saxons might have made England, but most of the time they had no overall concept of it, just as the Amerindians had no overall concept of North America, as opposed to their own bit of it, as far as we can tell. Overall, their heroic warrior-age culture and their subsistence peasant economy is very remote from us. But also, we mustn't go in for Victorian romanticizations, but Anglo-Saxon contributions are genuine. Christianity, number one, took permanent root in what is now England, and there was a great flowing of art, and particularly manuscript illumination from it, and even some Anglo-Saxon architecture survives. Not very much, but in Oxford you have the Tower of St. Michael of the Northgate, for example, late Anglo-Saxon, much restored. Then there's, for the age, an excellent local government set up. The shire system was set up. All the counties, Oxfordshire, Gloucestershire, Hampshire, come from their Anglo-Saxon names, Anglo-Saxon construct. Astonishingly, the Anglo-Saxon counties lasted with little alteration, or shires, from King Edgar 959 to 1974, when a recent government changed them drastically. Towns and villages were founded, Oxford itself, by Alfred the Great in the late 9th century, as a fortress town and a new town, for example. And the place names are for all over the place on the map, Anglo-Saxon place names. Bedford, Oxford, you name it. Abingdon. Right. Also, of course, our names of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, are named for Anglo-Saxon gods, a pagan survival. The Kingdom of England itself has a continuous existence from the 10th century to today, and the Queen is a direct descendant of the King of Wessex, Alfred the Great, who died in 899. And various institutions, i.e. the institution of the sheriffdom, was simply taken over by the Normans in 1066. I've said that the Anglo-Saxon element in language, in our language, English language, is not the only one, but is the one we use most, even though it's been estimated that 60% of our language is from Latin in one way or another, and only 30% from Anglo-Saxon. It's the one that we use most for all sorts of everyday things, dog, house, man, woman, relative clauses, who, my, me, you. It's also the one we use for all our deep feelings. We say, I hope sincerely, I love you. That's pure Anglo-Saxon. If we said, you activate my amorous propensities, pure Latin, it would sound totally ridiculous. So Latin tends to be used in educated discourse, of course for specialist professional registers, but every day, if you analyse what people are saying, it's more Anglo-Saxon than Latin. So, in short, I would say the Anglo-Saxons are perhaps the defining element in our culture, but England is very much a stew rather than one single plain meal.